Hello, everybody. I'm Diamond Dust. Welcome to episode 59, part 2 of the Wireheads podcast. As always, you can find me here on Twitch, over on YouTube, and a few other places across the net. And with me, as always, for almost every episode so far. Every episode.
I think there was one where we had there was a weird week that we still went ahead. And I think you had
So I had someone else on.
Scar on, but hello everyone. My name's Emmerron. I'm the other guy who works here. This isn't a particularly well lit place at the moment. Always lit by purple light behind me, but I am also a professional GM. This is the space out of which I do that. Occasionally I'll make content online. Right now working on an adventure that I hope to release by the end of next month. I tried to get it in for spooky season. That, alas, was not to happen because it's been a very busy month, and this upcoming month is going to be a very busy month. So we will try to make it by the end of November. But yeah, I'm here. I'm awake. I'm alive. And I'm ready to discuss some shit for Diamond's half the episode here.
All right, so Emmerron, I know I talked with you about this a little bit last week when we were kind of shaping up for episode 59 last week, but you know, we got all this going on.
I got a head cold.
I don't blame you.
The weirdest 24-hour, it's like the first tinge of a fucking head cold I got. I'm like, what is this? Why am I feeling by the time we got to showtime, I'm like, Diamond, I don't feel so good. And then I went to sleep that night, woke up the next day, and I was fine. I'm like, what is this? So it was literally my body decided no Wireheads last week. Sorry, guys.
So one of the things that I've had come up from time to time with some of my players or fellow GMs, some of my players who run Cyberpunk games is, Diamond, I'm killing my players too often, and it's just like, and when I say killing my players, when I say that, I mean killing their player characters, but you know what I mean. If you think that I endorse you killing your actual players, please go elsewhere. But anyway,
stop being a semantic jerk. We use language to describe actions taken against the fictional, not the physical. But
after a few different conversations with many different GMs and players that are just like, well, yeah, they don't want to play Cyberpunk because they keep dying too early or so quickly. And I'm just like, well, are you playing Cyberpunk 2020? I'm like, no, we're playing Cyberpunk Red, and it's just like, how are you dying that quickly in Cyberpunk Red? Cyberpunk Red is still a lethal game, but and collectively, from what I have found, sometimes when you play the game to the prescribed difficulty, sometimes either players will just absolutely mow over everything, or it's a pretty balanced fight, but sometimes you will have groups of players that don't meet the normal prescription that Artel has for opposition in different fights and whatnot.
Clarifying what you mean by that, you mean even if they follow the hardening rules, that this doesn't pan out?
I'm talking about a completely non-hardened party. It is like with some of these people, it's their first forays into Cyberpunk.
Heard.
So, and I'm talking compared to you and I, where we are well into all the different bits and gears of Cyberpunk Red. You have others that they drop in for a game or they drop in for a short campaign.
Yeah.
And that's about it. And they don't get into the DLC. They're very much a core rulebook player, and that's it. But nothing wrong with the core rulebook players.
No.
But sometimes with certain groups, because of now what's available, there is a there could be times where I've looked at I have a group that it's literally their first time in Cyberpunk Red, where Jerk Squad, if you're listening to this right now or watching this later, yes, I have had the kitty gloves on for a few things because I wouldn't say the kitty gloves, but
I wouldn't say that either.
They're very much the kitty gloves compared to what I've thrown at people before.
Well, and I think let's contextualize that part of the conversation correctly, because I think when we talk about what is easy or hard relative to a player's experience or even a table's experience, that's very much contextualized by the types of players that are at that table. And what is hard or easy for one group is a cakewalk or a slaughter for another, potentially.
Yeah.
So it's very contextual. So there's no real like kitty gloves or like I am beating the crap out of you with what I'm throwing against you. It's just is the difficulty even appropriate, right? Like I could do way more, but do I need to?
Also, like sometimes like some groups just don't know, oh, maybe that skill is really important. I didn't realize I needed that.
Yeah.
Where I am willing to I have learned over my time of GMing that yes, it is important to challenge the players, but when you start soft locking them out of everything, at some point you are going to hit a hard lock. So you have to create routes of success, even if it does mean lowering the difficulty, maybe reducing the amount of enemies on board, maybe adjusting the quality of certain weapons. You have to take some time to really evaluate your parties. So I guess Emmerron, while I did lead into this, when the question I want to ask you, when you have a party come to your table, whether it be like one of your paid tables or one of your other tables that you play at, what do you like when you first get a look at this party and figure out like what to throw at these guys? What are some metrics that you look for when it comes to it?
So the road standard one I first look at is anyone in this party hardened? And then by extension, is the whole party hardened, right? Because hardening really means that from the jump, these guys are going to steamroll anything presented just in the back of the core rulebook. This requires that you think about the party differently and that you scale things a little differently. And that's not to say that you don't use unhardened enemies. They have their place, especially really early in a campaign, I would say. Think of any good RPG that you've ever played, tabletop or otherwise, right? I think, though, that for what I'm describing here, it's pretty indicated in games like I just beat Claire Obscure the other day for the first time, Expedition 33. And I will not stop ranting and raving about that game. Thank you very much. Because I think that is the best turn-based RPG I have ever played in my entire life. And I have played a ton of them. I'm an OG Final Fantasy fan. I love that series. And one thing that I think Claire Obscure did really, really, really well throughout the whole of its gameplay is it tutorializes things at an appropriate pace. So it never feels like, A, things came out of left field to smack you in the face when they shouldn't have. Or B, like you are being dumbed down when you have less to contend with early in the game. And I think that basic mooks that are not hardened, even if the whole party is hardened, serve a purpose in showing that there are things that you will steamroll, because there will be things. Naturally, the world, to be a believable world, you have to have a gradient of threat, and you need to show a player group what all levels of that threat gradient look like. So that's usually where I'll start. I'll still start with really basic mooks, give everyone a sense of, okay, this is your environment, and it's more about showcasing the world around them than it is about making the combat raw challenging, right? Because you don't need to come off the jump with combat being a slog. You can start with something very easy, like its number of edge earners -1, booster ganger mooks out of the back of the core rulebook, and we just roll up a fight with them. You know, maybe it's a bar brawl, maybe it's something in a back alley where they're trying to mug the players. And it's something you know in the back of your mind as the GM, if you're running this with any level of experience. Like if I do this to a group of players, I know they're going to steamroll that group of booster gangers most likely. Now, this is not to say that this will mean that they are going to come out of that fight unscathed. And I think that that's more the purpose of that fight. It's not, I'm going to kill my players or even threaten death of a player. But if one of these mooks with a very heavy pistol shoots at a player and scores a critical, the players are going to learn one thing from that real quickly, which is that any gun is dangerous. The more D6s that fly when that gun goes off and hits you, that makes it dangerous. Even in the hands of something you could squish with 1 to 2 attacks, you will be threatened by this. And that is an important thing, especially if you're new to the game, to understand. But it's not going to kill you outright. And so from there, my gradient starts examining, okay, when do I start pushing that gas down a little harder? And that's usually at the end of the first adventure or the first like gig. That's where there will be some kind of like boss encounter sort of thing. And it won't be a full-blown boss encounter most of the time. Usually this is just, you have a more competent group of mooks. This is where you take the full calculation for hardening and stuff into account, and you throw them what would be considered a roughly fair fight per the rules, including hardening that you get out of the core rulebook and the hardened enemies DLCs that we have. And that's kind of where I start things. So at the risk of rambling further, this is where I'll turn that back over to you, Diamond, and ask you, did that answer your question, or do you want me to go into further detail? Okay, beautiful.
And I suppose for me, like when I look at how I adjust for parties as well, I take into consideration how many of these players are new. Because if a group of players are new, like I it's not that like suddenly I'm not going to throw anything dangerous at them, but I figure out where do I start the learning curve. Maybe I do booster gangers, or very very easy mooks for like just introducing these players into the combat system. Yes. So that way they can learn how that works. However, if I get a group that like I know these guys pretty well, and they understand the tactics of Cyberpunk, they know how to use cover, they know what tools to bring to the job, so that way they aren't locked out. There might be a DV-17 lock that's holding that door shut, or maybe a couple extra hidden traps that they need to have actively called to roll perception for. Perhaps go ahead.
Let me pose you a question then, just because of the way you're describing that. Do you meter your difficulty based on the area of the world the players are in, or do you meter it based on their capability?
When it comes to area of the world, combat zones, their difficulty is going to come from the gangs that run rampant through there. If you go to the hot zone and you're wondering, well, damn, I just got stomped by a cyber psycho that's hiding out here. Well, I mean, you are in the hot zone.
Yeah.
Same with the combat zones. The dangers in different places are going to come from different aspects. And it could be a situation where you decide to, you've been told, hey, there's some places you don't go in the old combat zone for good reason. If you go down there anyway, and then lo and behold, there's 15 gangers hanging out down there. And one of them's got an AK waiting to see who comes down the alleyway. That's where that comes from.
That's where my favorite boss level NPC, Hole Puncher the Almighty, comes in. No one wants to fuck with the guy. He's a cyber psycho, and he will show up if you challenge that. But that's to go back to something I think I've talked about it on my channel before, and it maybe was a topic earlier in the podcast's life, but where I talk about like mook math in terms of like, here's how you balance a combat encounter.
Yep. That was on your channel.
I was like, I think it was my latest How to GM, but yeah, that's where I start looking at that.
Also, like if you're breaking into a corporate facility after hours, expect traps.
You're gonna have a bad
expect time. Traps. Expect security personnel who know what to do when help is going to be at least an hour away, or it's going to be 30 minutes until the cops show up. I just. But like when groups are a little bit newer, I don't throw the mook fucker upper 9,000 at them or something like that. I don't immediately go swinging for the fences.
So how do you gauge when to pull that particular tool into their awareness then?
When they know to actively start packing equipment that they know they need for when these guys start planning for jobs where they actively are looking for the gear that they need for the job, when they are taking time to case the joint before they decide to go hit the place. So once they're carrying very expensive weapons around as well.
Okay. Because I was going to ask, what do you do if they're taking a longer time than is realistic's the wrong word, but like if a threat would present itself to them because of something they've done or decided to do as a natural consequence of an action, and you get to a place where that is not. Like, the world would react more violently, essentially, than maybe they're ready for. Do you ever pre-launch a version of that mook fucker upper 5,000 at them as a way of showing them, and this also is out there, and like kind of showing the threat?
I've done that a couple times where one of my groups, they started, fucking about with the iron sights. So the iron sights sent, a couple of hardened lieutenants and some mooks out to go, fuck their shit up and just, leave us the fuck alone. Next time, it won't be pretty.
Yeah.
It wasn't pretty the next time.
It was not pretty the next time. Yeah, no.
Because they thought, we got this, and it's like, no, they did not have it.
They did not. No, well, and so because when I run, so this is my escalation, right? So we get to the point that the party has run their first gig. They understand, okay, there's the world around them. These are the things that inhabit it. Maybe here's the way that this area may respond to consequences for the way that you choose to handle something, right? Usually it's by the end of like the second or third gig, my players have been exposed enough to the world around them that even if they haven't totally caught the memo about like, okay, you need to be prepared, you need to be thinking tactically, the next gig they get is probably going to be one that's going to be a test, right? There's going to be like, all right, so you've learned the things that you need to know to play the game at a basic level. You've done some really basic scav beat 'em ups. Maybe you've gone after something particularly dangerous, but where the environment let you have a relatively even or maybe even advantaged fight against the opposition that you were up against. What do you do when the tables get flipped a little? And now the fight is not so even. Maybe now it's slightly disadvantaged, but you have to take the fight, because to not would mean either you don't get paid, in the best case scenario, you don't get paid, right? In the worst case scenario, could threaten something you care about, right? And this is something that Mike Pondsmith actually just mentioned in a panel he did, I think it was just earlier today with CDPR.
Yep.
And he mentioned, and this is something I've definitely talked about plenty before, which is that Cyberpunk is not about saving the world, it's about saving yourself. And so when you come into these gigs or get pressured with something that threatens things you care about as your character, suddenly those things, it doesn't matter what the payout is, it doesn't matter what the gun that you're getting on the other end of it is, it doesn't even really matter who's putting you up to it. If the thing is something that you care about deeply, then you're gonna do it regardless of what any of the other outer stimuli look like. And so, like, this is where the moment I introduce you to a gig like that, the gloves have officially, if they were on to begin with, they are off. And I play the world about as realistically as I can. Keeping in mind, obviously, that this is a game. The game is meant to be enjoyed. It is not meant to be a self-flagellation exercise. It is supposed to be fun, but it will be full-fledged challenging for what I think you are up to as the party. But even within that, I will say, I am not going to intentionally put challenges in front of you that are full-blown gates to progress. I will throw some things in front of you that are going to be a challenge if no one can be particularly perceptive. For example, that's one I've encountered before in my parties, where no one invests properly into intelligence, their stat points, and then they end up suffering because their perception is at its best, usually like a base 8, if they put all of the skill points they can into it. But even then, like, if they've dumped intelligence that hard, they probably haven't noticed perception's part of it. And so they've got a base 8 or a base 10, and suddenly every perception aligned challenge that they have to face is that much more dire for them, because they need to get really lucky, if they can even do that, to succeed at it. The gate now becomes, can you intuit where things might be? And it becomes do the specialists in your party, like your tech, for example, know their way through this corridor in the way that doesn't set the trap off? Or do your combat specialists identify the threat properly and deal with it quickly enough so that it doesn't become an existential threat for the rest of the party? Those are the challenges that start coming up at that 4th session, just about almost every time. For me, is it's like, all right, we've started playing, we know what we're doing. I've taught you everything that I have to teach you, with the education mode, the tutorial mode, sort of flipped to on. The tutorial mode is off now. This is like, Night City was real before, it is extremely real now.
Usually about session 4 or 5, where the party is starting to really get a good hard grasp of what they're doing. That tends to be where I tend to stop the gas. But I have talked to some GMs where it's just like, what do I do? Because I want to throw these bigger things at my party, but they just keep getting wiped. Note from one of the GMs, they've gone through 3 iterations of player characters, and I'm like, what exactly are you throwing at them? And yeah, it turns out one of the other important things, GMs, we have a good guideline, especially for like the Cyber Psycho. We have a really good guideline for it. Now, I like to custom tune the Cyber Psycho so that way it's not immediately going to slaughter the party, but it's going to put up enough of a they're going to put up enough of a fight that it's going to make it a very big problem for the party if they don't get it under control really, really quick.
Yeah.
And it could also be a situation where, you know, the location does not call for having 5 security operatives or 5 security officers on site. Maybe operatives, but not officers. Like, really gauge, like, where the party is going as well. Because if, you know, the party is going to, let's say, a, you know, public storage facility of some sort, you're not going to have, you know, a whole squad of armed officers on standby, sitting, like, on site in case something goes wrong. But you'll probably be dealing with, you know, a little squad of operatives, you know, basic Kevlar vests, probably carrying either shotguns or rifles to deal with whoever's breaking in. But that's about it. So always make sure that, like, because if the players will be expecting that, like, if it's a low security site, they're not going to have to pack the heavy hitting stuff. You know, you might have people that do. So yeah.
Yeah, because, like, I think the way I look at it, and I'm a numbers guy, right? So,
yeah,
one of the big reasons why I liked D&D 4th edition so much is because it balanced things around hard numbers. That, like, you could viscerally look at the numbers, like, run it against your players, and you get about the result you expected. Cyberpunk does this, but there is a bit of nuance that the core rulebook doesn't quite explain. It kind of leaves it to you to intuit this. And I think Danger Gal's Mook creation guidelines honestly do a better job bracketing this without fully explaining why. And that is what skill bases do to the lethality of your adversary. So when you are looking at an enemy and you're saying, okay, I'm going to put this thing against my players, the first thing you need to do is you need to ask yourself, okay, does this enemy's health that they have, how close is that to the highest health represented by my party? And if it is significantly higher, it means that they are going to survive better than what your players will, right? And there are ways to inflate that number pretty easily with things like lace, like implant linear frames, all of that. So that's question number one. How does its health and my most hardy players' health compare? Because already that means that if you're setting your players up with an enemy who can dance around them with an additional 10 or 12 or like a 10 to 15 HP over them, your players need to invest significantly more into killing that number than it will need to do the same to one of your players. The second thing you need to ask yourself is when this thing fires its main weapons, and you'll know which ones they are, right? Usually it's your shoulder arms or your heavy weapons. And like your sidearms, like handguns and stuff, are more contingency. Auto fire, yeah. Like, you need to then ask yourself, okay, with how I'm designing this fight, because this obviously changes drastically depending on the fight that you have. So depending on the arena that I'm putting this adversary into, or depending on how good my players are at dodging bullets, if they can dodge bullets, how hard is it for my enemy to hit their shots gonna be, right? Or how hard is it for that enemy maybe to maneuver into their best range bracket for the weapon that they're using, right? So if they are firing grenades, the optimal grenade bracket is anywhere from 7 to 25. 7 to 25.
7 to 25, right.
Because it is 15 on both of those brackets that are contained in that. So it's the moment that they can make a 15 work, your base 14 heavy weapon or athletics boss that can throw that grenade, they're hitting on a 2-up. Anytime they roll a 2 or better on their D10, they're connecting that attack. And that's how you have to think about that. Same thing applies if now we have to ask, okay, I've got a shoulder arm, right? I've got an assault rifle. I want to make an aim shot on my opponent, right? I want to make an aim shot at one of the players. How hard is it for me to hit that aim shot? Well, if I take their skill base -8, and then compare that to a D10, and then compare that to the range that I'm likely to get, or against my player's evasion, that'll tell you how likely you are to be able to land that shot. And so again, we're playing everything by averages. Damage is another way you can look at this. Are my players mainly wearing light armor, Jack? All right, so now anything that hits for an average greater than 11 could do damage to them. Anything with an average significantly higher than 11, like a shotgun or an assault rifle, could do catastrophic damage to the person I'm shooting at.
Yep.
This is why you'll notice most mooks in the core rulebook are set up with very heavy pistols, because those guns land on average on a 14. 46 averaged is 14. This is a good number to know, right? So if you're hitting on average for 14 damage, that very heavy pistol is going to bypass light armor, Jack, on average most of the time. Anything lighter than that, like a heavy pistol, may not penetrate that armor nearly as easily, because the average on something like that is only I believe a 10 or an 11, depending on how you round your 1d6 average. So
usually, like when I average out for damage rolls, when I look at stuff like that, I always round down. Just so that way, I look at worst possible scenario on the average.
Right. So on the average, then your heavy pistols are commonly not going to penetrate fresh light armor, Jack.
Yep.
And so if you give your enemy these kinds of weapons over something like a very heavy pistol, they will do less damage on the whole to your opponents. This also gives you some downscaling potential, though, if your players do a lot of damage into your boss. Say you're on the opposite side of this equation. You're like, well, my bosses are getting wiped too quickly, not my players. Well, now what you actually need are, one, you need to facilitate a better top end weapon for that enemy, probably, and the skills to use it effectively. You need to set up environments in which those things can be useful. And you probably need to give them some kind of contingency for what happens if maybe they suffer a critical injury and suddenly they lose use of one of their arms. And that's easier than you would think to have happen. There's a lot of critical injuries that suddenly take away the use of a hand, or an arm, or just shoot one of those off altogether. I think it's like a third of the possibilities on the critical injuries chart takes away some form of that.
I think there's four that mess with your hands, because there's dismembered arm, dismembered hand, broken arm, and crushed fingers. Right.
So ultimately, you need something. So if your big bad is always using two-handed weapons, and your problem comes up that, they lost one of their arms, or the use of one of their
reinforce
arms.
them.
Well, either you need to reinforce them, that is one option, or you need to give them another weapon that can be used with a single hand as a contingency. Because that will enable them to keep fighting and give them a fighting chance against your players if your players are used to overrunning them. On the whole, I will say, though, I think usually the problem when you're encountering your players dying off repeatedly or too often is that your skill base of your enemy is tuned too high. They're too consistently able to apply damage when your players are not able to.
For a bunch of fresh rank 4 edge runners, What base 12 is like somewhere between 12 to 14 is what I've seen, but normally base 12 is
12?
what I've seen with a lot of them.
So base 12 is really, really solid for standard enemies. Like your standard enemies should be at a base 12 roughly.
I'm talking about like players when we start looking at the player sheets and decide how we build.
If they're effective at fighting a certain way, they're effective to a base 14 nearly always. I will prepare for my players to have a base 14 and their attacking stats of choice.
Okay.
Yeah, because that's where they can max it out. And no one, and I mean almost no one, is going to nerf themselves out of a base 14 in whatever skills they want to be most effective at. If they're point buying, at least they won't ever point buy out of that unless they are being like incredibly intentional about that, and then they've got to plan enough to deal with the fact that they're missing 2 points there or whatever.
Yeah, like Summer's got like a base, like using Summer for example. Her handgun currently is at base 9 +1 for the excellent quality pistol, so she shoots at base 10. But she's also not combat oriented. I always take into account the non-combat oriented members of the party to kind of figure out where is that perfect medium. Because
see, I don't actually. When I'm scaling for my combats, I don't take into account the least combat prepared person, because you built your character to not be good at that, and that's okay. But now this is where you get to feel the flaw in your character. If I adjust to that, you don't ever feel the flaw, right? That's why I look at it through that lens.
I guess to clarify specifically, I don't reduce my enemies' skills in response to a party that has lower, that might have a lot of like lower combat ability. But I may adjust their armor or health. So that way, like, maybe instead of leathers, they are wearing Kevlar, and that or so that way, like when the solo makes hits, or the nomad or the lawman start, landing hits, the enemies can still stand up to it, but they're not immediately getting wiped by any non-combat players easily either. Like, I will give some booster gangers Kevlar. I will do that. Or, scavenged armor.
Yeah.
To make those adjustments. But never, like, lower the health.
Right. Like, the thing is, usually when I'm looking at that layer of the game, because this is the other side of adjusting difficulty that I think we haven't discussed is your game is only difficult for your table if everyone at the table is bad at one thing. And if you then use that one thing as the crux of a mission or the storytelling angle by which you are telling a story, that's going to suck way worse for them than if it were just, oh, we have one person who's really, really good at solving for this particular angle, and everyone else is dog shit, right? Because if you have one person good at solving the angle, they'll solve it, and the party moves forward because of the specialty, and that makes that player feel really good, honestly, because it lets them express what makes their character special. So I look at combat that same way, where it's like, you as a social, like if you're playing, again, taking Summer as the example here, if you're taking a very socially tilted character into combat, they are supposed to not feel effective. Like, that is how they should feel in the hands of the player when that comes up. The warrior type players will feel much better, and they will have a sub-objective the whole time then of those guys can't take shots. I keep them back behind me, and I will defend them. Or I will do all the damage so that they don't have to, right? Like, maybe they act as a brief decoy or something while I get a couple shots off from an angle that the enemies can't currently attack. that's something that comes down to like designing for skill expression, and I think that is almost as important as actual combat balance. Is that you are balancing for your party's skill expression, because there are so many tables, especially for new GMs, because I've been guilty of this too, where your player takes an off label skill, right? We're talking something like paint, draw, sculpt, or composition, or play instrument vocals, right? Something like that, which is, when do you call for that in a standard game if we're running the gig by the book? Not often. But if you are adjusting your game to the party, there will come a time where that thing, that niche thing, gets used, and you will call for it. And that's got to be as much a part of balancing your design as anything else that we've talked about in terms of actual combat. Because, like, if, let's for example say, if your combat is set up in a way that you're in this really tight space, and your party has most of its weapons good at longer ranges, suddenly you could design that space. Like maybe there's an amplifier plugged in at the back of this little club, right? Suddenly that sing check that you could do, that play instrument vocals check, that party member who has those points in, they become a tool and they can solve a combat puzzle with that. You've just got a point. You notice there's a mic and a massive stack amp at the back of this thing from the band that just went off the moment things kicked off here. As far as you can tell, it has not been turned off yet. And just like make that something that they notice. Killstrom, right. And so then all of a sudden, that play instrument check is enough to deafen everyone in the room. And you've got a very different sort of combat layer that party member who maybe isn't as combat focused but does have that skill, they can play that angle. And it lets you be more interesting while also letting you incorporate some added challenge to your combat that can be counteracted with creativity on your player's side. That's always what I try to do, is I try to lean into that.
All right. I think we're coming up on what, 42 minutes here.
Yeah.
But I was just doing a quick time check.
Yeah, my side ran a little long.
Yeah, and I know we ran long on your side, so
we've got about 15 minutes until the hour.
With the but like all in all, when it comes to adjusting difficulty for the players, if it's like the really new group, don't be afraid to lower the DVs. Maybe, use maybe like lighten up on what kind of firepower the enemies might have. Now, if you're throwing them into something like Red Chrome Cargo, where it is expected to be, you are getting in there, you are getting into the fight, don't change stuff like that. But if this is, the party is going in to hit a scav haunt, and, scavs already don't have a lot of great weaponry as is, but you don't need to give them, you don't need to give, one of the scavs a grenade if, these party members are... You don't need to give one of the scavs a bunch of grenades or a rocket launcher. Like, I love to give scavs like one Gunmartin gauge every once in a while, just for funsies, because you need some explosives.
Well, and I firmly believe that even with new parties, you should throw one bit of chaos into early
absolutely
easy encounters, so that they can see in a quote unquote safer environment what that thing can do. Because then when later on, it's not the cheap ass Gunmartin gauge getting hauled over the shoulder, but is an actual threatening rocket launcher that like is designed to do some damage. Either a star or the one of
Tsunami's.
K-Tech Tech Hammer. That's the one I was thinking of.
Oh,
Yeah, like if one of your enemies at the end is pulling out a tech hammer, and you describe, you can see under the barrel there's this massive pack of rockets that are ready to be fired. And your players have seen what a gun Martin Gage can do with a rocket. They now know exactly how threatening that gun is, and they've seen it in a more contained environment, so that the later response they give to it is more appropriate and proportional to what they're seeing.
And also, of course, if players had the idea, would have been able to know to prepare for a job, but they didn't pick up stuff that they needed, you do have the penalties as well to apply there. But also make sure that you don't soft lock your players out of don't hard lock your players out of completion. That at the end of the game, I've always ran Cyberpunk with the intention of having fun. There are stakes to this game, but I believe in making sure that you're telling a good story at the end of the day.
Fail forward is the correct philosophy. If there is no way for your players to fail and still make progress, there's a flaw in your design, and that's something that you should consider. There's also
complications are fun.
There's also something that we didn't really explore here, that I call a combat kill switch, which is basically if I have overtuned my boss encounter and all of a sudden my players are getting slammed with a thing they did not ask for, I've got a point at which big adversary will say, all right, mop him up, and just leave, because he now just doesn't think that the players are worth his time. And they'll just walk. So now the players have a guy they need to go hunt down after this.
An enemy.
But it has the mathematical benefit then of leaving his mooks behind, who the players may be able to mop up to deal with. And just be like, all right, cool. We're taking the big threat off the board because he's proven the point. And now he's just been more cemented as this is a BBEG that we will use later to make your lives hell and give you nightmares. And it's fun because then at least you haven't followed through on a thing that you did not intend for, right? In terms of, I am just going to slaughter my players. But you also have proven that this is a threat worth dealing with down the road. You've got both of those things that you've taught as lessons, and your players will remember that, and that's the important thing.
Yeah, I guess I will always advocate for this when it comes to Cyberpunk. You're here to tell a story and make sure that with this, like Emmerron has said, fail forward is a possibility. Complications are fun. Maybe sometimes I have made pick lock checks specifically for no matter what the door does open, it's how quietly do you open it, and does it set anything else off on the other side?
Yeah. The difficulty with something doesn't need to be super obvious. That's actually a great way to put it. And this is also where, if you ever see in a pre-written adventure, because there's one in the Street Stories that I know Diamond and I have talked about to no end, there's a section in one adventure, and again, in the effort of not spoiling anything for people who've not played through the book, there's a section where if you're the GM, you're reading this ahead of time, it calls for 2 or more players in the party to make a success against a DV-17 check. And
17 is considered difficult for anyone that might be new. 17
is a lot, especially if the party hasn't had many adventures yet, because the highest base you can have at character creation for any skill, without aid from something like cyberware, is a 14. So This means that they expect you to beat that, because you have to beat DVs. Again, for any of you new or coming from games where meat is the option. At DV17, you need to roll at least an 18 to succeed. So this means they want you, a relatively new player, to roll at least a 4 on your D10. And then when you add your modifier to make that check, and at least 2 party members need to succeed on that. So what this has led to is when this check is inevitably called for in this section, it leads to that section slowing play down to an unwieldy degree 90% of the time. And that is where I will literally just say, okay, if I have someone, any one person in my party, who is capable of beating that DV, I will give it to them. Because you don't need 2 sets of eyes to notice things. You need 1. And add to that the fact that if the player suggests something else for that section that they'd like to do to try and investigate their surroundings, to locate their objective, I will take that into consideration as well. Consider when you see a pre-written DV in any adventure, whether that's homebrew or an RTL official one, that is the challenge that they are suggesting for that issue, based upon what they feel is the context and stuff. And you can always modify that, because the difficulty could be something other than what seems obvious.
And like, even on top of that, in Tales of the Red Hope Reborn, in one of the adventures, it calls for a very specific difficult skill. Now, difficult skills, they cost a lot more points that some players might be hesitant to spend out the gate, or cost more IP. So it has been suggested, there may be other alternative routes to, handling the situation.
Yeah. Well, and at least in Hope Reborn, they illustrate that. They highlight that. In the section of street stories I was talking about, they don't. And that's where I think that's one of the greatest shortcomings in that adventure, is that section, because of that.
Other than that, absolute banger adventure.
Yeah, no, that adventure comes out of, and GMs that have run street stories, you'll probably know exactly what I'm talking about, because I've given enough details that are specific to that adventure for you to pick it out from the bunch. Those of you who haven't read through it yet but plan on running it, you'll know when you see it, because and I would encourage you to, utilize other skills, or just that DV altogether. Maybe 2 or more players don't need to succeed the DV17. Maybe instead it's a DV15. There are multiple ways to go about solving for that problem. None of them are wrong. I've always thought that skill check was overtuned. I think that needed to be brought down to either a single person succeeding at that value, or 2 or more succeeding at a lower value. Or if you succeed a lower value, maybe you see something but don't recognize the threat that you are now going to contend with. That's on the other side of that. So yeah, that's the sort of thing that I would look at it through, the lens I would examine it through. Hold on, a cat is being a problem.
Oh. But yeah, as like my final wrap up on this, when it comes to adjusting the difficulty slider, you're not, taking the teeth out of the game. What you're doing is you are setting the challenge appropriate to your players, whether they be new, whether they have been around for a while. Especially like the real seasoned ones like Emmerron or I look forward to, GMs that are just like, screw you, here's a auto fire at plus 16, just like, all right, I'll roll evasion, I'll take my chances with it.
Yeah.
I love it. Like, you will find there's different dynamics where I have a table where all of us have played Cyberpunk Red since it started. They're like, all right, GM, you don't have to give us the introduction mission, just throw something at us. Like, okay, all right. You're getting assigned to a cyber psycho case. Congratulations, Lawman. Welcome to the team. And I love cases like that, but also with the new folks, I'll keep it real light. And if I feel all right, maybe very heavy pistols might be a little too lethal for like a group of 3 new people that are playing, I'll switch over to heavy pistols. I make sure that things still have teeth, but it's not going to immediately wipe the new players on session 1. Because
yeah, I think we have slightly differing philosophies where that's concerned, just because like,
and that's okay.
It is okay. Because from my side of it, I believe exposure is the best teacher. And exposure with a small HP pool, but the weapon is kind of like spooky, teaches people to respect certain types of things in the world when it's attached to a much larger problem later on.
Yeah.
So that is the philosophy that I balance around. I may do my own how to GM to kind of like talk about the method I use, because it's I think it's worth exploring that. But yeah, like we've said this whole time, this is one of those spots where Diamond and I have different philosophies or slightly different thoughts about how to approach a thing, and neither is wrong.
Even you might have different philosophies than us, which everyone's entitled to their opinion. Like, you have a way you run your table, you run it how you wish. This is not me saying, listen up, the way you GM sucks. That's not what I'm saying here. What I am saying, though, is take this as food for thought. That's all.
Yeah.
However, I have received 2 questions for this week. So I'm ready to go to Q&A if you are.
Yeah, I know we're kind of we're looking at 7 right now, but I am down to
all right.
I am down to talk Q&A here, as long as the questions themselves are fairly quick. Let me grab the Q&A document here briefly.
Well,
oh, you haven't put them in there. That's fine. Okay, what do we got?
So first one is from Fish. Fish is wondering, with the Militech Perseus, because Fish wants to include the Militech Perseus in a boss fight, but it's wondering what would be the perfect environment for what's considered to be such a rare gun.
So the perfect environment for what would be such a rare gun is, one, it's in the hands of someone who could afford that, right? Because 5,000 of these doesn't come easily. So this either means that they are strong enough on the street to have either wrestled or won this off of somebody, or they are rich and have the know-how to use a gun like that. Environments, any close quarters combat, any CQC environment is going to benefit pistols. The more, and 2 ROF 46 is scary. It's super scary. Remember though, and because this was something that one of my friends brought up, and this is something you could play with too as well, if you want to be a real asshole with the Perseus. The first thing to remember is that a basic Perseus, like a regular one that you pick up off the street, can only fire basic ammunition. Does not have the caveat that lets it fire all types. It is exotic. So if you put it into someone's hands and that thing can fire bullets that are not basic bullets, that is a tech upgrade, which costs an additional 5,000 eddies worth of value on that gun to do. And took a month of time for a tech to put that together. So to that I then say, if you do have a real powerful corpo like security guard or something, for which money is not a problem, and they've had an R&D division look at the gun and build it, you could have it firing exotic rounds as well, like armor piercing. And that makes that gun even more lethal than it already was. Or you could have them attach like an upgrade slot to it, so you could upgrade the gun with like a smart gun link. Even though that takes 2 slots, you could also tech upgrade the link to take 1 less slot. So like again, if we're talking R&D shit, like if it's a corporation and they've got a close to unlimited budget and you want to really throw something powerful at the wall, those are some ideas. You could get a smart gun link for it. You could upgrade it to take non-standard ammo. World's your oyster. But yeah, CQC, anything that you've got tight corners, because point blank is the best place for a pistol. And then you obviously want the wielder to have like a decent survivability, like armor, maybe tech upgrades, some subdermal weave or whatever.
Probably like, mob boss's bodyguard, or possibly an executive that just happens to, have quite a bit of experience in the field.
My GM for One Red Knight gave Michael Deckard one when we chose to attack him.
Okay.
Yeah, and he made the mistake of tech upgrading it, which isn't so much a mistake as a choice, but he didn't realize it was a tech upgrade, which is why I called that out in specific, because I'm like, oh, he's firing AP rounds out of that thing. It shouldn't be able to do that by default. So I got his Perseus at the end of that firefight. We won that hard. That was not an easy fight, and I took that fucking gun, and I was so proud to take it.
All right.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
Then second question. In light of Halloween coming up, what is your favorite candy?
Honestly, especially because it seems to only really pop up around Halloween in a way that is easy to find. And I know there are going to be people out there who say, "But Emmerron, you can just buy it at the store." I don't care. It's more notable and it's more prevalent. Would be 100 grand bars. I love 100 grand bars. Those things are very good. It's a close run between them and crunch bars, but I would take 100 grand, I think.
And see, for me, I do enjoy Nestle Crunch Bar, but the salted nut roll actually happens to be one of my favorites from when I was a kid.
I've had one of these.
Yes.
Is that is it kind of similar to like a Payday?
Maybe. I've never had Payday before. It's
okay.
Marshmallow. It's like one of the few ways that I actually like marshmallow. Like with some caramel and salted peanuts like coated all over it. And it just comes as is. Yeah,
okay. That's not too dissimilar from a Payday bar. I think they just use nougat instead of a marshmallow, but yeah, and same kind of texture and everything. So yeah.
All right, well that's my two questions. Folks, have a wonderful Halloween to you, Twitch, and to everyone else. Welcome to November. I'm so sorry that All I Want for Christmas Is You is playing on the radio now.
Oh god.
Yeah. Can't even wait till Black Friday.
That's the thing my wife showed me last night. She sent me a short of, it's literally Mariah Carey playing into the meme, and it's just her in all kinds of different environments, like beginning to dress up for the holidays, saying, "Not yet." And I'm like, I think I hate this worse. I think I hate this more because she's playing into the dread of it, and I fucking hate that. Stop.
Yeah, having worked security, I've heard that song so much during the holiday season. I'm just like,
I worked for 2.5 years in a grocery store, and to this day, the songs that played on loop in there are like, I have a distaste for them, and several of them are ones that have gotten new life online for other reasons, and I'm like, I will never not be able to consider the context I first heard this in was the grocery store, where I'd stand for anywhere from 4 to 8 hours in a shift and like have to listen to this on fucking repeat. Yeah, no, I'm with you.
All right, but with that, as always, I'm Diamond Dust.
And I'm Emmerron.
This has been Wireheads, and we will see you soon. Bye-bye now.
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.